No let-up in the daily cycle of deaths, destruction and displacement in Gaza. Palestinians say any hopes of a pause in Israeli attacks after the Lebanon ceasefire are fading. So can efforts to revive negotiations to halt Israel's bombardment in Gaza make progress? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. It's been a tense week in the Middle East since a fragile ceasefire was put in place in Lebanon. The US president's announcement soon after that he'd be turning his attention to Gaza bolstered hopes of a truce in the Strip. Behind the scenes, efforts are reportedly underway to get back to the table to try and stop the Israeli violence and facilitate the release of captives. But on the ground, Israeli bombardments have been unrelenting, and the UN says the delivery of food and aid into Gaza is at an all-time low. Will the violence derail Washington's plans, and what is likely to happen once Donald Trump takes over in less than 2 months' time? We'll delve deeper into these issues shortly, but first, this report from Mohammed Haji.
Appalling and apocalyptic, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres' words to describe Israel's onslaught on Gaza over the past 14 months. That's killed more than 44,000 people. Those who survived the bombardment face hunger. Israel has repeatedly restricted humanitarian aid from entering Gaza and is accused by aid organizations and the UN of using starvation as a weapon of war. Aid agencies bringing in desperately needed humanitarian relief into Gaza have also been attacked. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has been forced to halt the delivery of aid through the key Karam Abu Salim crossing between Israel and Gaza because of safety concerns for its staff.
The United Nations on a daily basis have been calling for the safe facility, not just of aid supplies, but also of our personnel. UNRWA has had 250 colleagues killed.
Hopes for a ceasefire in Gaza were slightly raised after the US President Joe Biden announced a truce between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon at the end of last month.
Just as the Lebanese people deserve a future of security and prosperity, so do the people of Gaza. They too deserve an end to the fighting and displacement. The people of Gaza have been through hell.
The US has restarted efforts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza ahead of the inauguration of Donald Trump as president in January, and urged Israel to do more to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid throughout Gaza.
We need to get a ceasefire. We need to see the hostages released. We need to implement plans for the day after that would allow or would establish governance, security, and reconstruction inside Gaza. And that ought to be an urgent priority, not just for the United States, not just for other countries in the region, but for Israel as well.
The Gulf Cooperation Council has reiterated its call for an immediate end to the war on Gaza.
The Supreme Council called for an end to the crimes of killing and collective punishment in Gaza, the displacement of the population, and the destruction of civilian facilities and infrastructure. The Council also called for intervention to protect civilians, stop the war, and sponsor serious negotiations to reach sustainable solutions.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has faced increasing domestic pressure to reach a deal with Hamas to secure the release of captives that have been held in Gaza for more than a year.
I turn to you, Prime Minister, in my name, in the name of my family and in the name of the Israeli people, because all eyes are on you now, waiting for you to make a courageous decision.
US President-elect Donald Trump is reported to want a deal on a ceasefire in Gaza before he takes office in January next year, and has warned there will be, quote, hell to pay in the Middle East if captives held in Gaza are not released before his inauguration. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly been accused of stalling negotiations until Trump moves into the White House. Mohammed Haji, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Al Jazeera correspondent Tariq Abu Azoum sent us this update from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. He describes the plight of Palestinians after facing more than a year of violence.
It has been more than a year of relentless bombardment across the Gaza Strip, where the situation is growing more precarious by the day. Gaza civilians are incredibly caught in the grip of this ongoing, soaring conflict on the ground that has no end in sight. They are not just overwhelmed by rubble and destruction, they are incredibly also struck by the high rates of famine that is taking place across many areas in the Strip. The people of Gaza are quite simple. We have been speaking to them to listen to their dreams and hopes, and what we have found out was quite heartbreaking.
We want a truce today, not tomorrow. Have mercy on us. Our children are dying. They're dying from the garbage, from the Israelis, from the remnants of the occupation. We don't know what to do. We are unable to find something to eat or drink.
The vast majority of Gaza's population have completely been suffering from one of the worst embedding humanitarian crises ever recorded in modern history. They have completely run out of options and means to survive in light of the latest UN decision to suspend aid deliveries to the Gaza Strip due to safety concerns. And now what they have only is a glimmer of hope for the success of the current round of negotiations in Cairo in order to bring an end for their ongoing soaring agony on the ground. For Gaza civilians, future is quite uncertain, and even the wait for peace seems to be endless. Tariq Abazoum, Al Jazeera for Inside Story, Deir al-Balah, Palestine.
Well, let's bring in our panel of guests to discuss all this further. In Washington, D.C., we have Jihad Abu Salim, Executive Director of the Institute for Palestine Studies. In Tel Aviv, Gideon Levy is a columnist at the Haaretz newspaper. And in Doha, Omar Rahman is a fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs. Thank you, all of you, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. It was a week ago that we had that ceasefire signed involving Hezbollah and Israel. It's a very shaky ceasefire, but it's still holding right now. At the time, there was some hope expressed that maybe there could also be a ceasefire in Gaza. Let me start with you, Jihad. What has been preventing a ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, thank you for having me. The entire world is united in calling for an end to this senseless bloodshed in Gaza. President-elect Trump, the Arab nations, the Palestinian factions, everyone is aligned on the need to stop the bloodshed and rebuild Gaza and allow Gaza to heal. The Palestinian side has developed a comprehensive vision for what comes after the war and after halting this genocide. This vision is rooted in national consensus, and it's endorsed by nearly all factions, and it corresponds with key international efforts to stop the killing. And of course, as I mentioned, this vision isn't just Palestinian, it has widespread Arab support, including from states that have relations with Israel. So the question then is, why does Israel keep saying no to ending the violence? And I think this is important because ending the war could potentially expose Netanyahu to accountability at home, and ending the war could challenge the agenda of extremist elements in Netanyahu's government that are pushing for ethnic cleansing and annexation. They want to settle Gaza. They're talking about it. It's explicit. And it's clear what's happening. This isn't about Israeli security. It's about advancing a dangerous settler agenda. And I believe this is what's preventing a ceasefire from taking place in Gaza.
Let's get the perspective from Gideon in Tel Aviv. What is Israel actually achieving militarily right now? Because it's killed Hamas's most senior commanders. What is the Israeli military actually achieving?
Nothing and nothing, except of more killing and keeping the Israeli government in power, which is the main goal right now. I would like to be very clear, James. I know what might happen, but I know much more what will not happen. Israel is not going to withdraw from Gaza. There are no plans for it. On the contrary, the infrastructure that Israel is building now in Gaza is like 1,000 proofs to the assumption that Israel is there to stay. And the ethnic cleansing of the northern part of Gaza is like 1,000 proof to the fact that Israel will or might settle in the northern part of Gaza. Having said all this, there might be a kind of an interim agreement very soon with release of some hostages and some kind of truce, but forget about withdrawal from Gaza, and those are the worst news we can think about.
Omar, do you share that view that Israel wants to put new settlements, particularly in northern Gaza? There has been a siege going on there now for more than 50 days. Supplies are not getting in. The UN is not getting in.
Well, I think there are differences of opinion within the current government. There are certainly elements within the government on the far right that want to resettle Gaza. I think there were others, even the defense minister that was dismissed, that were more hesitant to put settlements. But all of them, I think, have been united by the desire from day one to pulverize Gaza, destroy it, and ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. I think there were limits to that because of Egypt closing the border, but there's a determination to do that to the northern part of Gaza and to maintain a long-term Israeli military presence in the Gaza Strip that they can use to control the rest and put pressure on the population to dwindle over time. I think that's been the overriding objective. That's why we haven't seen a ceasefire, because the Israelis have not wanted that. Netanyahu's government has not wanted that in order to pursue this agenda. And so I think the ceasefire negotiations that have happened over the past 14 months have always been not serious because of Netanyahu and his goals.
Jihad, I mean, what we heard a moment ago from Gideon about what he was predicting was matched by someone who's certainly not a dove, which is the former Israeli defense minister, Moshe Yaalon, who served as Netanyahu's defense minister from 2013 to 2016. He said in recent interviews, the road we're being led down is conquest, annexation and ethnic cleansing. He says the Israeli cabinet want to re-establish Jewish settlements. How do you think they will react to that where you are in Washington, D.C., because we have the Biden administration who's opposed those sorts of things, but of course they are not going to be in power for very much longer?
Well, President-elect Trump has repeatedly announced, and people in his circle, that they want the war to end. Now, if they are serious about ending the war and ending the bloodshed and restabilizing the Middle East and promoting peace and putting an end to perpetual war. These are sentiments that are expressed by certain elements in the transition team, in Trump's circle, and also by his base. If they are serious about these things, then a forever war in the Gaza Strip will not help achieve that. It will not help with restabilizing the region. It will not help with any possibility for restoring calm, quiet, stability, or even creating any path forward for any diplomatic and political efforts to achieve whatever vision this new administration has for peace and security in the region, regardless of whether we agree or disagree with that vision. But the point here is that if Israel continues with its endeavors in Gaza to ethnically cleanse the north, to also destroy the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's not just northern Gaza. The entire city, most of the city of Khan Yunis is done. We're seeing scenes coming out of Rafah of Israeli civilian contractors bulldozing entire neighborhoods in Rafah. Most of the city of Gaza has been destroyed. So what does that mean? That means an endless humanitarian crisis, an endless refugee crisis, and a continuation of the bloodshed and violence. So if people in Washington are serious about ending the bloodshed and creating a diplomatic and political path forward for peace and stability in the region, they cannot allow Netanyahu to go on with his personal agenda. And of course, they cannot allow the Israeli government to keep enforcing and promoting this crazy settler agenda to not only settle in the Gaza Strip, but also annex and settle the West Bank. And that was pretty, clear when we heard Lindsey Graham talking about how Smotrich was putting words in President-elect Trump's mouth by talking about wanting to settle the Gaza Strip. So I think there is an opportunity here to end the killing, to stop the bloodshed, to return the hostages, to bring kidnapped Palestinian prisoners and hostages home as well, and to establish a significant political path forward for the region. That cannot be done with this government in Israel continuing with this dangerous agenda.
Okay, let me bring Gideon back in on that, because the pressure points on the Netanyahu government, one is US leverage, and they haven't used it, the Biden administration, because clearly they could cut all of the funding and all the military aid if they wanted to. But the other one, over the last 14 months, has been those that were taken by Hamas more than a year ago, those that are being held. We think just over 60 may still be alive. Now, their families and Israeli public opinion was pushing pressure on Netanyahu. Have those people now been forgotten?
Politically, yes. Publicly, not. But politically, it's not only they were forgotten, they were never remembered by Netanyahu and his government. This is not his political base. And from the beginning, he could ignore the protest and solidarity of many Israelis, because that's not his political basis. And therefore, he ignored them, and he can continue to ignore them, even though it is really a horrible tragedy for so many people. But the other leverage, namely the American administration, is right now a big mystery. Because even Donald Trump, when he speaks about ending the war, which he likes to see, does not speak about withdrawal from Gaza. So I will not exclude the situation in which Israel will declare ceasefire and remain in Gaza, which means a war forever in Gaza, because the resistance will never agree that Israel will reconquer Gaza and maybe even resettle Gaza. So I'm not sure that Donald Trump is a source of hope. There is one reason why we should hope from him more than from Biden. Netanyahu could easily ignore Biden. He will not be able to ignore Donald Trump. The question is, what will Donald Trump tell to Israel, and what measures will he take if Israel will not follow his instructions or advices or threats or whatever? And the very few days will show what is the direction. But one thing must be clear, there will be no peace in Gaza when Israel stays there. This we have to repeat again and again, because I have this feeling that someone in the American administration, with all those Israel lovers around Donald Trump, who most of them are more radical than the most radical settlers in Israel, some of them might think that a peace in Gaza means a remain of Israel in Gaza, and that's out of the question.
OK, I want to drill down a little bit more on talks. We hear some more talks may be taking place. There have been some talks not involving Israel taking place in Cairo. Omar, what are you hearing about what is being discussed at this stage?
Well, I've heard of two sets of talks, one between the United States, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, and Israel in terms of a ceasefire for Gaza that the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, says it's pushing for. Again, I don't take those talks seriously because the U.S. has been unwilling to exercise any of its leverage over the Israelis, which is what would push for a ceasefire. I do take seriously the potential, and this is sad that we have to rely on this, that maybe Netanyahu wants to appease Trump when he comes into power, and Trump's desire to be, the peacemaker and fulfill those promises. And maybe that way you get to some sort of end to the type of, intense bombing of the Gaza Strip that we've seen. But I don't see the potential for a longer-term ceasefire. Another talk that's going on were Egyptian proposals for kind of a day after type of scenario among the Palestinians. And you had an agreement yesterday between Fatah and Hamas on a type of unity administration and a committee to run the Gaza Strip once Israel leaves. But again, we're talking about scenarios in which Israel has been unwilling to, participate in the dialogue in terms of a day after scenario, because it's been clear from the beginning that their day after scenario includes their long-term presence in the Gaza Strip, the destruction of Gaza, and the emptying out as much as possible of its population. And so when it comes to a ceasefire negotiation, there's been no material gains or any type of success in that because of Netanyahu's goal. And I don't see that changing. There may be some difference when Trump comes to power, but again, Netanyahu has an overriding goal that I don't think aligns with even what Trump sees. And I don't think Trump has a detailed plan for what actual peace, ceasefire, and a day after means in the Gaza Strip. And certainly, Netanyahu is going to try to leverage whatever he's willing to do in Gaza into maybe Trump's acceptance of annexation over the West Bank, and that comes with a host of all other problems, and a recipe for indefinite conflict, obviously.
Jihad, my understanding is that those talks in Cairo have involved both Fatah and Hamas there, and the plan is to try and get some sort of technocratic committee to run things in Gaza. Have you learnt more about what is being discussed and proposed? And do you think it has any chance of the Israelis saying yes to it?
Like Omar said, those plans depend on Israel's willingness to say yes. The Fatah and Hamas in Cairo are have been engaged in talks for months, and those talks led to an agreement to form a community support committee, a committee that is rooted in national consensus, a committee that will play a role in overseeing Gaza's governance post-war to ensure a smooth transition and to pay attention to the needs of the population there and to create an agenda for rebuilding the Gaza Strip. The committee will consist of technocrats, experts, and figures who are accepted by all Palestinian factions. But at the end of the day, Palestinians are showing readiness. They are showing a vision for the day after. The lack of a vision for the day after has been cited as one of the reasons for why a ceasefire isn't achieved. Now there is a clear vision for the day after. Palestinians have developed this community support committee vision to ensure that it addresses international concerns. It has the support of the Arab world, and it also involves a Palestinian national consensus. Ultimately, what the Palestinians are presenting and what they have agreed on in Cairo, in the form of a new Egyptian proposal that would also incorporate this vision for the day after. This combines elements with President Biden's plan, which promised a full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip initially. So with this solid framework on the table, with this new Egyptian proposal, with this Palestinian comprehensive vision for the day after, it's baffling that this genocide keeps on going. And the Palestinian side, as I said, has showed readiness. So it is time now for Israel to meet the Palestinians, the world, the Arab world, even its allies, and the United States, assuming the United States is interested in ending the war, to meet all of these players halfway.
OK, we spent so much of this programme talking about the diplomacy and the politics, Gideon, but I just want to turn and remember the grim reality that's going on in Gaza right now. The humanitarian situation probably as grim as it's been at any point. After 14 months of horrors, The listed death toll is about 140,000 people killed. It's probably much higher than that, but that's a staggering average of about 10,000 people killed every month for 14 months. How does it make you feel as an Israeli who, for years and years and years, has advocated for peace?
Before even you mentioned it, James, I wanted to mention the images that follow us while we are talking about all kinds of strategic plans, the horrible images that you just broadcasted and showed, which, by the way, are not being shown in Israel at all. And while we discuss all kinds of ideas, every day, dozens of people in Gaza are getting killed for nothing. Most of them are innocent people. Most of them are children and women. And what should I tell you? I follow it now over a year. And I must tell you that never in my life or in my career, I felt so much pain, physical pain, to see those scenes, knowing that my friends, the sons of my friends and the friends of my sons are committing those crimes.
Omar, a final reflection from you on the situation on the ground.
I mean, based on the reports from people that have gone to the Gaza Strip and are saying that this is worse than anything they've experienced in their professional careers, and based on the testimonies, the imagery that we've seen come out of Gaza every single day for the past 14 months, it's worse than my worst nightmare of what could have happened. You know, the bottomless pit of suffering that the people of Gaza are going through is beyond belief, and it's shocking to anybody with a conscience that nobody in the world has stepped in whatsoever to defend the Palestinians, who are totally vulnerable to this genocidal campaign. And that's an absolute tragedy in the 21st century for that to be happening, and for no one to really care about the Palestinians at this point.
Gaza abandoned by the world. What a thought to end our discussion on. Thank you to our guests today, Jihad Abu Salim, Gideon Levy and Omar Rahman. Al Jazeera has teams on the ground in Gaza. Follow their searing reports every day and get even more analysis and context on the website, aljazeera.com. We want to hear from you too. As ever, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or you can post on X, where you'll find us at AJ Inside Story. From me, James Bays, and all the production team here, please stay safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.